So this episode is going to be a little bit different than the last two that you would have seen. So this one is more of a reflection from us guys, you know, having those conversations with the guys on the actual pod, but then also talking to them afterwards. So one of the main things that we're going to do during this podcast is get everyone that comes on to give us our one piece of advice that they'd give to blokes to be 1% better every day. We're just always going to start with that. I think that's just going to be our standard. It's a really good way to sort of start the pod, and it gives some really good insights to people. And on those really good insights, I just want to reflect on, so our first guest that we had on, Jonathan, where he was talking about his 1%er, which was sort of around, it was around understanding priorities. So when he sort of drilled it down, it was understanding what those priorities are, and then trying to understand the level of importance each one of those priorities actually has to his life.
Yeah, I think it definitely focuses your efforts. I think if you don't have an idea of what you need to work on next, what you need to put the majority of your effort on, you do get paralysed by indecision. I think that's where Jono was coming from. Is you know, he said there at the end or somewhere in the middle, you know, you'll be working and doing a little bit here and a little bit there, and you sort of, you know, you don't necessarily get that win and get that that endorphins. This, you know, a lot of people get endorphins and what's the other thing, dopamine out of starting things, and you don't get that rush of endorphins during the grind in the middle. There's no reward in the middle, but I think having that priority and knowing you're working on that, you've probably got a little bit more drive to do that grind, get to the end, get the finish, and get that big rush of dopamine that you need to sort of go, yeah, this was worthwhile.
Yeah, and I think completing tasks, like I think that's where you were getting to, like without having that list there and setting those clear priorities. And we touched on it on the pod. It was just that being able to finish the tasks as well that he set aside. I know he didn't. He sort of we joked that, you know, do we ever finish our lists and that kind of stuff. But from a personal point of view, having that kind of list, and he mentioned the stress and burnout of work, like how important those lists are to managing sort of expectations of work, and particularly from his role as a program manager and that kind of stuff for an engineering firm. It's really important to get into that stuff. So, Sam.
Yeah, Sam was a good one, I think. He was fairly worldly. He's obviously had a lot of experience right across the board, right across the nation. So, but yeah, definitely that you know, having a goal, making sure you're working towards it, giving it that time that it needs to get to where you need to do, to get to where you want to be. And then also, as you put it, are we past 5 minutes yet? Can I say the word?
No.
Yeah, near enough.
Effort.
Yeah.
Not effort, but F it.
Yeah.
You know, just let it run. Don't worry about it too much. You sort of start overthinking it. You get that as other podcasts say, head noise. You know, and you just, it just messes with your head.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can totally relate. And I think to his point of goal setting as well, like we mentioned this on first pod, and I'm a big believer in setting goals, but also I did really, you know, value his point of, I guess, don't let your goals consume you. Don't let your goals become sort of just everything that you're focused on in life. And
have a day. Take a day.
Yeah.
Take some beers down the river and have a drink.
Yep. Have those fuck it days.
Yeah. Well, there you go. We must be past the 5 minutes, but
not quite, but we're close enough to.
Near enough to.
Yep.
But like, he's you know, maybe you want to listen to country music. I don't know, but you know, Sam obviously does.
Each of their
More power to him.
Yep.
You know? Two types of music.
Run your own race.
In there.
Yeah, country and west.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it was refreshing to see a different point of view there.
Yeah, and on the different point of view, they were vastly different. If you listen to that in sequential order, it's going to sound somewhat horrible because you've been told to have a list and then you've been told to not have a list and don't do anything.
Yeah, don't fucking worry about it.
But that touches back on, you know, everyone is different. Everyone's going to view it a different way. And whilst we definitely want people to take something out of this podcast, take something from both of them because both of them have value. And none of them are any less value than the other one. they are just different. For me personally, I'm not a list person, but it's probably got merit. It works for him, so maybe I could try it sometime. It might work, I had a go at being 1% better, and, I also might just take tomorrow off. I don't know. Will I?
Yeah.
Because fuck it.
it's I guess the thrust of the podcast is go, hey, this is what all these people do. Maybe you want to try. You don't have to, try it out, see if it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, then try something else.
Yeah, and these aren't conversations we're going to have, in the backyard at cooking the barbecue. These are conversations we're having now to be able to sort of showcase these things for you, the listener, and everybody else. So
Yeah. And call it a buffet.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm a bit of a tight ass, so I generally go to a buffet and can try a bit of everything. But
Stack your plate really fucking high.
yeah, I mean, like, who else has been to a buffet? How often do you actually like everything that you take from the buffet? You generally, I don't, and I'm not a super picky eater. But I guess my point being is that you're gonna hear shit on this podcast that is just not going to resonate with you, and that's cool.
Yeah.
You're going to hear shit on this podcast that you might find offensive, but for someone else, it's what they need to hear to get themselves through a mental health problem.
Yeah. Horses for courses, run your own race.
Yeah, 100%. And just the reflection of 2 episodes of how 2 people can be so incredibly different, but full transparency, both of them are board members with Man Up Tasmania, which have like a very clear sort of direction towards mental health.
Yeah.
So and men's mental health. So, although they share very different journeys and very different sort of ways of like managing their mental health and understanding, we're all sort of on this same ship together. So
Good smorgasbord. There you go. That's what you wanted, wasn't it?
Smorgasbord. Yeah.
Of views. And I guess Sam sort of mentioned it too. And it's, having these tools in your toolbox, wasn't it? Having this stuff in your vocabulary, in your toolbox to allow you to sort of just step out of yourself a bit, recognise your situation, maybe do some work on yourself before you get to that crisis stage.
Yeah, and I think the toolbox analogy is a good one, particularly for blokes. Like, and look, I don't care how handy you are. Like, most blokes know that you need a few tools to do a job. You can't fucking hammer a nail with a drill. Well, you can try.
Well, but recent experience, you'd have more than one golf club.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Same analogy. Like, different horses for courses. You're not going to use a driver in a bunker. But that's where like we need to understand it. And the purpose of this podcast is helping people. It's giving them those tools to to understand it. Like, talking's one thing. And it'll help some blokes. Reece, you really, in sort of the first podcast, you mentioned the breathing exercise that you've done and how that helped you.
Yeah, and like you said, they are tools that you can use. And I think, was there like a car analogy and taking it to the mechanic maybe or something? And that's back to that crisis mode and being able to, we need to fix ourselves before we crash. Like, we don't need to be fishtailing all over the track because we got bald tyres. Let's fix those bald tyres so we don't bend it into the wall because we don't need that. Like,
go and get a service.
Yeah, go and get checked up. Do what you need to do. And I think, as cliche it is, it all does start with a conversation because 2 years ago I wouldn't have had a clue about when we talked even with Jono in that podcast about his feelings and how he felt like someone was sitting on him and he didn't know what he was feeling. He didn't even know how to bring that up. Well, I was the same. I didn't know how to bring it up, and I went I wouldn't say I went to rock bottom and crashed out completely, but in the scheme of things, to me it was a big hit. Other people have been through lots worse, and that's a really sad thing that we've got to come to that realisation so hard and yeah, why can't we fix ourselves earlier than that? And, start that conversation, get the ball rolling, find out what works for you and, get ahead of it, be proactive.
I don't know if it was mentioned in the podcast or in the discussions before or after, but about the, someone, there's 7+ billion people on the planet. Someone's probably going to have had an experience kind of similar to what you've done. So someone's probably already had a fair crack at learning the lessons. So, you know, it's you don't need to get yourself into that crisis mode to learn the lesson yourself necessarily. You have got, you know, the conversations could lead you to finding that information for yourself before you got to that crisis point.
Yeah, definitely. And you may not even need to seek professional help. It may just be, you know, a mate of a mate who went through the same thing and I'll just put you in base. And, you know, I know that there's a lot of Facebook groups and stuff for, you know, widows and stuff like that now that, you know, really connect them in a way. So there's those tools I didn't even know existed, but they're there. It's just about talking to the people that know they're there. So
Sam mentioned his Facebook group that he started called Our Brother's Keeper.
Yeah.
So he created that when, you know, he had suicide in his life, and he's constantly sort of telling me how he, you know, like how he's realised he probably didn't realise how much it was going to actually help people, just creating this Facebook group, and how big it's sort of, you know, relatively big it's sort of blown up to, and the type of support that he offers in that is very much. If you liked how he spoke on the podcast, that's exactly what his Facebook page is like.
Yeah. And he spoke lots
raw.
about the, you know, the old times, I suppose, in a way, where they would go to the pub and have a drink. And, you know, it has changed now in that social media world and the communication world, how it is so easy to have a conversation with everyone every day, but we don't do it. But I assume, like, back in the day, if Barry didn't turn up to the pub on a Friday night when he normally would, there's probably something wrong with him. We better check in on him. And they did it that way rather than how we do it now. So
They'd go and drag him to the pub probably.
yeah,
They probably wouldn't have the discussion about, are you mentally healthy? But they'd go, come on, get out, let's go for a beer.
Yeah.
And it might just come out organically.
Yeah.
But, you know, like... Yeah.
And I think really everyone, probably to your point there, is like, I think everyone even back then knew that people weren't okay. You know, like they'd check in on them, like people would know, all right, mate, you probably look like you need to come out for a beer, or you need to do X, Y, and Z, or let's go. People have been doing this for ages.
They weren't putting the label on it.
Yep, exactly. They just weren't labelling it as a mental health activity. And look, you know, we've been obviously drinking beers in these past few episodes that we've put on, but we don't always just enjoy beer. But like, you don't always have to have a beer. Like, and to Sam's point, like, you know, a lot of those blokes that were having beers, like, was it the actual act of drinking the beer, or was it just the talking with mates that actually helped them unwind?
Yeah, it's probably forms part of the activity that makes it comfortable to open up.
Yeah,
you know, maybe it's not the effect of the alcohol. It's just the fact that you're sitting down doing the same thing as someone else.
Yeah,
and you've got some commonality there, and it just starts you opening up.
Yeah,
and find that commonality. It could be a round of golf with beer.
Yeah,
without beer. Sometimes you can play golf without beer, I think.
Yep.
Is that true?
Oh, you sure can.
Someone
but
has said that.
I just reflect on drinking beer as like beers for beer's sake. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if anyone else has drunk at home alone, and I don't know if I want to admit that I have, but it doesn't generally make you feel any better or worse. So that's
kind of just when you drink a beer at home, unless, you know, for some people it's probably not, but it's just another liquid to drink.
Pretty much. That's how it feels for me.
Yeah.
So, you know, like that's sort of made me think that maybe like that whole mentality of going to the pub to have a beer with the boys wasn't about the beer, and it was about the boys.
Yeah.
Probably also too, it's a sense of community there.
Yeah.
When you go to the pub, and probably the current social focus, current social, I don't know what the word you want to say, the social opinion of going to the pub and having a beer is less accepted these days.
Yep.
You know, like, oh, you don't drink beer, beer's bad for you, or, you know, drunks drink beer, and it's sort of stripped that spot you can go to away, because you're like, oh, the stigma's shifted from, you know, the stigma is still there around talking about mental health, but you've now got this stigma around going to the pub. You know, you've got this label on going to the pub that you might not want to necessarily put yourself on, label yourself with.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can definitely relate. And you've only just got to look at the type, like, to the point that you made at the beginning of that, like how many people are actually at the pub these days, like versus, you know, a few years ago. Like the scene down here in Tassie has changed, immensely. And I see a lot more young people now than ever, out taking stuff that may not necessarily encourage a good conversation,
Not, and again, it's not like we're advertising drinking beer or,
No.
that's not what we're trying to achieve, but I'm just sort of maybe highlighting the fact that you just need a space to go and talk, and the current stigma around going to the pubs, maybe cross that one off the list.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. I think back to I guess come back to Jonathan's points as well. I can kind of understand where he's coming from around he talked a little bit about burnout, and to completely segue away from beers and pubs, but burnout was something that sort of I'd spoken about on the first episode of the pod as well, was where I was at with work and everything that I was doing with sort of Man Up Taz, starting podcast, day job, all that kind of stuff. It all got a lot. And knowing and understanding, obviously, that you can't do it all. But for me, a lot of it was as well based around that, goal setting or priority setting and understanding, what's important, what needs to happen and that kind of stuff. And I had done this process, I call it brain dumping, where you literally, if I'm in bed at night and really sort of struggling to get to sleep, and those nights where you just can't fucking stop thinking about everything, just having the notes up and on a phone and just smashing out, seeing literally everything that you're thinking of, and just put it on your in your phone, and then that you don't have to think about it anymore. Yeah. So go to sleep.
Because it's written. Do you have a pre-sleep thing to wind you down?
Oh, not a healthy one. Way too much social media and crap.
Yeah. Have you tried banning the phone hour before bedtime, or is it? I
think it's an hour.
Yeah, I think it's an hour.
I heard
have you
it's
tried
an hour.
that?
Something to do with blue light and stuff. And
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I've done that. I did that on night shift. That worked when I was working in the mines. That's actually effective. It was good. So
yeah,
but I don't mind the brain dumping. Maybe I'll have to try that.
Yeah.
Is that all you do? Sometimes others.
Yeah. So the brain dumping was. Recently, I had a life coaching session, which was included in another program that I'm doing. But I spoke with the coach there about the idea of mindfulness. A lot of people talk about mindfulness and all this kind of shit, and they start talking, salt lamps, meditation, Reiki. Not that I've got anything against any of those things, but not really my cup of tea. But when we were chatting a lot about just what mindfulness actually means, and sort of that whole idea of it's just helping you to unpack inside your own head. And then I got sort of thinking about it at that time as to how do I defragment everything that's sort of in my mind and everything that's going on. And to Jonathan's point, and also even then to probably Sam's as well, prioritising what the activities are, and first you need to understand what the activities are that you need to do. So you need to sort of know what actions you need to take that week, that month, that whatever, and then you need to prioritise which ones are the most important to you today, tomorrow, this week, etc. That brain dumping activity is really, really valuable, and one that I'm going to spend a little bit more time practicing is that. Potentially even looking at that sort of meditative sort of space, and when you get pulled out of that meditative sort of space by your own thoughts, which is just going to happen, writing down whatever those thoughts are just on a sticky note and then just chucking them in front of you so you can just forget about it and then start again. And I think a successful meditation session is not how long you can sort of stay just focusing on your breathing, but how many times you can actually bring yourself back to that state of just thinking about your breathing and just sort of being mindful in the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's a goal of mine for 2023, is to start doing a little bit more of that to help me to defragment all the shit that goes on in my head, honestly, so I can have more space in my nothing box where I can actually just sort of chill out and just think about nothing.
I feel like I might need if I was to do that, I might need a meditation hat or something like that. Just meditation in progress, do not disturb or something like that.
Need a special space, mate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. No, I think that's pretty much it. I don't know if anyone gets anything out of these little reflection sessions, and as we continue to do more of these podcasts and more of these episodes, we're going to have more reflections that we're going to be able to add across multiple different episodes, and no doubt we'll start to then see all the different similarities or differences between people and their opinions, and no doubt these conversations are just going to get bigger and better. So if you've stuck through to the end, thanks very much for sort of sticking on. If you're on YouTube, please feel free to subscribe to the channel and like sort of what we're doing. If you have any advice of what we want to do, love to hear it. So drop that down in the comments. If you're listening across any of the podcast platforms, please feel free to shoot us a line or anything like that on the email that we do have attached there. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.